welcome to our show. Just welcome you to our show, and then I'll just dive into the questions, ask questions, and we'll have a conversation around those questions.
Great.
Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
All right, let's rock and roll, and then we probably will be able to give you back some time of the 45 minutes, but we always just try to block the 45 in case we need them.
Of course.
Okay.
But you know,
All right.
I screw things like this up a lot, Janet. So
Yeah. I don't think you have any talent in this area at all. Oh my gosh. So, and just kind of by the way, I've got you and the other keynotes, and I'm kind of asking around the same questions. So it'll be interesting to kind of compile, those thoughts and information. I thought people would get a good understanding of the different perspectives and your experiences that attach to that. So it should be fun.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'll be interested in hearing theirs.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, you ready?
You bet.
All right. So Dr. Kelly, welcome to our show today. It's great to have you with us.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right, so let's start with the first question. You and I have had a chance to work together over the past several years, first with your first presidency and now your second. And so over the past year, you've been selected the president of the University of West Georgia. What aspects of your past experiences have prepared you for this particular position?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will tell you that over the past year, I was very grateful to have been a president before because of the immense challenges that we began to face. But I will tell you the things that probably gave me a more confidence in navigating the elements that were in my toolbox from past experience were one, a PhD in political communication.
Yeah.
I say that because, political communication is often focused on tensions between things. It is making argument and overcoming obstacles, and it often embraces the negative. And when we went into a pandemic year, the level of anxiety in our society really went up without clear identifiers of where that anxiety was sourced. So just kind of understanding human beings and human communities through that lens was helpful to me. Additionally, having navigated crises in higher education in the past, both as an executive and being on the receiving end in other leadership positions in academic affairs, were really helpful. We faced so many different challenges, both financial and societal, this year, that being able to rely on experiences where you've been through the crisis and you came out on the other end, that gives you a roadmap. I kind of go back. Mike Tyson always said, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. Well, I think as an industry, as a university, as a state, as a nation, we got punched in the face about 6 or 8 times, and really were forced to pivot. Knowing that you come back from that was important, at least for me this year.
Yeah. And as we think about it, Brendan, the pandemic, helped us move through transformational change in an unbelievable way, but we were going through that change prior to the pandemic in higher ed. We just had it accelerated for us a little bit. So I'm going to ask you, 2 questions, just the kind of natural questions of what are the biggest opportunities that you see in front of us in this transitional time and transformational time? And then we'll come back to, what are the obstacles or the challenges? But let's start with, what are the opportunities that we have now as we continue to transform?
I love this topic and question. I would challenge the question, or at least the premise of the question. At first, though, well, perhaps we have been going through transformational change. I would argue that we've been talking a lot about going through transformational change.
Yeah, good point.
I'm not sure that we were actually doing it, because if we were doing it, we would have a greater appreciation for higher education meeting the needs and expectation of those we're in service to. And that would be communicated to us from students, from graduates, from industry, from communities that we're in service to. And that's not what we hear. What we hear is a call for higher education to go through transformational change. And then we have been discussing it. Now, 2020 opened that conversation up in an entirely new way. And I love the first part of this question. What are the biggest opportunities? Well, the biggest opportunities are for us to start to run toward those expectations. I mean, if you have industry and communities and graduates and students saying, here's what we need from you, this is our opportunity to embrace that call, to change the way in which we shape credentials and deliver credentials, reshape how we're going to appreciate diverse types of learning and the types of experiences that are going to come along with a university education that are going to be distinctive from any other deliverer of higher education or post high school graduation education, so that we can make certain that we're demonstrating the value of not what we deliver, but what we are capable of delivering in the 21st century. For me, this was the opportunity to embrace the transformational change, as hard as it is. That's the big opportunity on the table for us to become what people have been asking for us to become for some time. On the obstacle side, it is the exact reverse. Amidst all of those opportunities, amidst that opportunity to run toward the expectation of those who are in service, gosh, the Chronicle of Higher Education's done, and Lumina Foundation have done articles over and over and over this year about our fierce defense of the status quo, our unwillingness to accept new ways of doing our work, embracing new responsibilities, embracing new ways to deliver higher education, new circumstances to do that under. I think back, 10 or 15 years ago when we were sitting and having all of these debates about online education, but somehow in 2 weeks, all of America can go and deliver online education, and not without troubles, not without us underperforming in some areas, but we were also able to diagnose a lot of those and move forward. I mean, the biggest obstacle to the transformational change in higher education is higher education. It's us, it's our mentality. And I really hope that that we are strong enough as an industry to overcome that commitment to the status quo, embrace and accept what the society needs from us, and then go and deliver it in new ways that just inspire a new generation of learning and thinking and imaginative invention.
Yeah, and never in our wildest dreams did we probably think that we would be sitting here today knowing that we'd have that opportunity that this quickly and right in front of us,
Yes.
so exciting and so energizing. So as we think about that, Brendan, so you came to the institution, you went into a pandemic, or in the pandemic, when you actually took the president's role, but you still had to run a university for a year. You still had to still had to do the things that a first year university president would do. So what were the most significant actions that you think that you did as the leader of the institution in your first year?
Well, that's a long year, Janet.
I know. I thought about, wow. What do you choose?
The other day, the other Dr. Kelly and I were driving in the car, and she looked up at me in the sunlight and went, "Wow, you've got a lot of gray hair." I don't know what to think about that, but
yeah.
So I will tell you, the timeline moved so fast. I started early because of the pandemic. It was supposed to start April 1st. I started March 23rd. That was probably wise. We waded into such a complicated set of circumstances, and there were no really good answers to any question. Nothing that was really desirable. I wouldn't say good. I would say desirable, because the circumstances were so hard. We didn't have students on campus. We didn't have employees on campus. We were shut down, shifting to online. I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
I couldn't get to know anybody because we were all remote. And as a new person coming into a community, you start to see the deficiencies that come along with Zoom very quickly. And the lack of acquaintance relationships and just the ability to get to know each other. It's very challenging. But we made some moves that were important to the health and wellness of the university. And I'm going to acknowledge on the front end, many of these were not popular. I do believe they were correct for the state of Georgia, for the university system of Georgia, for the University of West Georgia. And my default was always health wellness of the student. How are we going to put students in the best position to be successful? Because the things that I did know about the University of West Georgia were where we performed in graduation and retention and enrollment, and progress toward graduation is everything. And what happens to a student after they graduate, whether it's from doctoral school or undergraduate, is that's a big part of the measure of what we provide human beings. So we experienced a large budget cut. One of the largest in the history of the state and university, just a few weeks after I started, and we had a very short period of time, 10 days, to deliver the plan for this institution to the state. That was really challenging, and we erred on the side of restructuring the university, on tightening our belt in certain areas, but knowing that we would have to address that tightening later. We could only do so much of that. We really had to restructure the university to save costs and make certain that we could still deliver the best possible experience that we could. We were able to preserve every academic program and every faculty position in that process, which we're very proud of. But that didn't mean it wasn't hard afterwards. Additionally, we, along with other institutions in the state of Georgia, reopened. We reopened in the fall. That was hard. It's hard to reopen with masks. All of a sudden, putting students in a position where they get their dream and they get to have their own residence hall room when they start college. Because all of us remember these horror stories about having a roommate and whatnot. But that's part of the rite of passage of coming to a university. And many students missed that. By the end of the first semester, students were requesting roommates because they were becoming isolated. We were delivering a lot of, a portion of our courses face-to-face, and figuring out how to do that with limited students in class each time, some online and some face-to-face. However, reopening and trying to get college back, that was a difficult task, but it was a good, positive action in the right direction. It reminded people that there's more to our human experience than surviving the pandemic, and kind of got people moving. And I will tell you, probably the most important one, despite all of the challenges and criticism and kind of the anxiety of this year, keeping a positive outlook, despite everything we've been through. I see just as much opportunity for the University of West Georgia now as I did when I got hired. And a lot of that came from the fact that we made a choice about 6 weeks after I got here, while we're still shut down and everybody's running around going, we don't know what comes next. We entered into strategic planning and executed a strategic planning process that allowed us to come out in February of this year, having had 1,300 people involved in that process and almost 300 hours of discovery sessions, and a plan for the future that embraced the 21st century, put the University of West Georgia on a path to go and meet the future, instead of just dwelling on what we were no longer. And I think, while that's a hard process, challenging one, I think that was a very significant action for us to have positive progress in a year where there wasn't a lot of positive progress.
Yeah, and it was very positive, Brendan, and pretty and healing for people, as part of that process, in many ways. And just the bold actions that you took last year. It's hard to look back right now because we're not out of it long enough. But boy, I think when we sit here 2 or 3 years from now and look back, we'll just see how significant those actions were to position UWG to be something really special, and continue to be. So as we've been talking about what you've done, and we're talking about leadership in general, and you and I've had conversations about the the changes that are going to occur in leadership over the next decade, next 3 to 5 years to a decade in higher education. So this last question is, as we think about what's in front of us in higher ed, what will that future leader have to look like?
That's an interesting question. Not like the leaders of the past. Higher education's asking for something different now. People who can operationalize change. I very much reflect on the type of transformational changes that have occurred in other industries. I obviously come from Michigan, so I can reference the auto industry. And I know a lot of people would say, well, higher education is totally different. Well, I don't view it through that lens, because I don't think most industries are entirely different. I think higher education is a lot like healthcare. I think those two industries have a lot of good comparisons, and healthcare has been through a lot of transformation. We have to go through the same thing, and that's going to mean stark organizational change. Obviously, we're watching state governments, state boards of regions, and the like direct a lot of that change across the country for public higher education. I think the types of leaders that we need are, and a colleague probably put it best to me yesterday. She was referencing another university president. She didn't tell me who had said to her, we needed innovation, but innovation's not good enough for the 21st century for higher education. Now it's about imagination. We need people who can see things that are not there yet. People who can imagine structures and ways of doing that don't necessarily exist. And then we need them to have a steely enough spine to actually take the organization there. Because I think what we're going to see if we don't have that type of leader, we're going to see organizations not just suffer the way we have at different points over the last 20 or 30 years in higher ed. I think we're going to see an emboldened trend of institutions disappearing.
Yeah,
because I don't see how the marketplace will bear the infrastructure if we don't figure out how to make it work better for the people we're in service to and the industries we're in service to. Janet, there's one thing that I would highlight in that, and I know you and I've had a chance to talk about it before. 50 or 60 years ago, American society didn't rely on higher education for their talent. 50 or 60 years ago, you could go and get involved in the economy and get involved in leadership in the economy and not have to have had to go to college, right? And then things changed and the knowledge economy began to grow and become fundamental to who we are as a society and as a national economy. And then universities became pipelines for the type of talent that fed that knowledge economy. So now there's a greater reliance on the talent that we produce. And we need leaders who understand those connections and can organize universities around being able to deliver that to the economies, industries, and communities that rely on us. I think that's a really important thing for us to understand, because if you go on a lot of university campuses, we don't, that conversation is resisted a little bit because it's inconvenient for us as universities, but it is essential to America. So,
right.
And we all have to be working together in this thing to make it successful. So Leaders who understand how to connect those dots and have the skill set and strength to work through transformational change is going to be necessary, in my view.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt, Brendan. And, just as we look at change in the future, it's the constant shift and change and the ability and to have the agility to that change and to build a team of people who can work toward that continuous change. And we're not in a place where it's continuous change, as John Cotter says, it's continuous change and not episodic change, right? We're just always leading through change. It's just part of what we have to become, which is what where you thrive and where you've done such an excellent job. And I just enjoy the conversations we have, and you're going to be a great leader at UWG and continue to provide great influence into the profession. And I'm glad I get to be a part of that. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad you're a part of it too.
Thank you. Thank you.